Friday, everyone. Your real worth isn't defined by your net worth. What makes you valuable is how you use what you have been given. All of us have gifts. Make sure you're making the most of yours. Have an amazing Friday.
It is now the bottom of the hour. I'm excited to welcome Nancy Matthews to our program today. Nancy is an author of a book. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it in the carousel for you guys. There it is, The One Philosophy. I want to talk to Nancy not only about the re-release of the book, but also what it's been like for her to share the message with all of you guys. Nancy, great to have you on with us.
Hello, hello, hello. So happy to be here.
Raise your hand if you've ever been busy. Raise your hand if you've ever got tired and feel like you just need a couple days off. Most people would have both hands up right now. That's our world, fast-paced and income-driven. That's why we get caught up in our own lives so often, and that's why it's understandable when most people don't focus on worries that aren't their own. So what makes someone become a humanitarian? Someone whose whole life focuses on the welfare of other humans.
When you go back and you see kids that were living on the streets, kids had no structure, they had no routine, people who had nothing, they didn't have meals. When you see that all of a sudden they're waking up, they have structure, they have something to do, they have a meal in their belly, their life changes completely. They, like I said, their self-esteem changes, their self-worth, their ability to know who they are in the world and what they have the potential of becoming, to give that hope, to give that dream, and then to watch people actually use that to do good for themselves and others it's amazing. It becomes an addiction.
And with Serena's help, we'll find the meaning of life to a humanitarian.
Good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Et toi? Ça va très bien. Ni hao. Hola. Ohio. Bienvenue. Wan Ying. Bienvenido. Yo koso. And welcome. Welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each and every week, I get the distinct honor and pleasure of coming into your home and taking you on a journey to places you've never been before, to hear stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get the magnificent opportunity to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. And I use that as a template as an inception point to get you to begin to discover the value of your own stories. I want to first say hi to some new viewers, Stephanie and Sophie. Thank you. Thank you. I met them a few days ago. Thank you. Welcome. And again, happy birthday to those of you who are born in June. This is your month. This is the month of a pearl. And I love pearls, and I love this month, and I want you to begin to, this month really begins to get you to understand why I do this show. What is the whole concept of the gem hunter and what this logo means. Barbara, bring up my screen for me, please. When you begin to, so we're going to talk about the majestic power and magnificence of pearls. But before I get started, let me just say this, that this show is probably PG-13. So Stephanie, you may not want to have Sophie watching this show. So let me just give that little parental warning. Not that it's going to be that but maybe the little topic might be a little bit too much for her. So just hi, Sophie. And we're just going to give Sophie a second to leave the room, or any other kids, because this is kind of interesting show. All right. So let's get started. Before you really get to understand the power of gemstones, not just pearls, but gemstones, I want to take you back to a cartoon that we all watched when we were a kid. Remember the Road Runner and the Coyote? The Road Runner, you always watch those who are of age. We used to watch that cartoon, and every week you would see the coyote chasing the Road Runner. He would come up with all different kinds of ways to try to get the Road Runner. And he would order from this store called Acme. Acme was kind of like the 1960s, 1970s Amazon. Everything. You can get everything and anything from Acme. So the coyote would get trucks, he would get nuclear weapons, he would get all types of different inventions, holes invisible holes and all kinds of things. He would even get Roadrunner food, which he would set out a trap for the Roadrunner in order to capture the Roadrunner. And of course, each and every show, he would come that close to getting the Roadrunner, but then would fail, and he would fail spectacularly. He would literally fall off mountains. He would have whole entire cliffs just come off the part that he was on, and he was falling down this endless precipice, with this mountain, with the peak aimed at the center of his body. He would fall, boom, you would see this puff of smoke, and then of course the mountain range would fall on top of him. And yet, despite all that, he would always come back. Every show, he would always come back. And I never really understood that. I never understood why would he keep enduring that type of pain. And it wasn't until I started getting older, I began to understand that the Roadrunner, the coyote, was not trying to eat the Roadrunner, because I said to myself, if the coyote could order all those things from Acme, why couldn't he order a sandwich? Why? Acme had everything. Why couldn't he order coyote food? Why? He ordered everything else. But then it dawned on me that maybe that's not what the coyote wanted to do. He didn't want to eat the Roadrunner. He wanted to do beep-a-doo beep. This is a family show, the Roadrunner. And so when you begin to understand jewelry, you begin to understand the significance of gemstones in women. Each week I tell you that there's a connection between the two. And that's one of the earliest examples as I began to understand what gemstones do to women, what women, the significance of what women have in human history. In a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, really, we talked about, so before I go to this symbol that I have behind me, this is the symbol of the gem hunter that I came up with a long time ago. In the center is the concentric circles, which is more Celtic, and it has the meaning of eternity. And each, from the 12, the 3 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock position, you see rubies, sapphires going from clockwise. Rubies, sapphires, emerald, citrine, which is quartz, gold, and diamonds. And these are the gemstones that has significant parts of human history. And last week or a few months ago, we talked about Cleopatra. I told you that Cleopatra, first of all, she didn't look like this, because she was born into an incestuous household. She didn't look like this. The reports I've read, the books I've read, that she was not exactly the prettiest girl in the world. She was average at best. Long hook nose, but her power, but she had a power over Julius Caesar, the greatest Roman of all times. Okay, he was a Roman general. He became a Caesar, and I told you how the moment that Caesar saw Cleopatra, he just fell in love with her. That was the girl. I imagine him, those who saw the movie Harlem Nights, I remember, I imagine Julius Caesar calling home and saying, "Hey, honey, listen, yeah, put your mom on the phone. Yeah, hey, Barbara, yeah, I'm not coming home anymore, okay? You and kids take care, bye." Because that's what he did. He met Cleopatra, he went crazy because Cleopatra's power came from emeralds. So we talked about that. Again, women and gemstones, the significance of it. And we talked about all the qualities that emeralds have. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about this young lady, Marie Antoinette, Queen Marie Antoinette. And I told you that her and her husband, Louis XVI, got embroiled in this whole affair, literally called the affair of the necklace. This was the necklace, the 2,800 carat diamond necklace that Marie Antoinette never actually owned. It was designed for her because she was so over the top with everything that she did. The two French jewelers created this necklace just with the expectation that she would buy this, and she didn't. She hated it. She thought it was the most god-ugliest thing in the world. And I told you about how this whole con woman came into their lives, and ultimately we know what happened to that whole French court, the French Revolution. This was the thing that started the French Revolution, that necklace. So as I began to study gemology, I started seeing a pattern. How could jewelry, I understood being married a few times. I understood the power of women, but I didn't understand the power of gemstones. And then it began, the whole concept of storytelling really began with the pearl. With the pearl. The pearl is a magnificent gemstone. When pearls come in so many different colors of the rainbow, and people, pearls have been known. Pearl is literally like the original, truly valued gemstone. Pearls back in the day, in Egyptian times, pearls was only handled and given by Isis, the literal god, feminine god of Egypt. Pearls have always been associated with femininity, with the whole seductiveness, the mystery of gemstones. This is a pearl. Going back to Julius Caesar, before he met Cleopatra, Julius Caesar had a woman. He had about 500 women in his life. See why I had to let the Sophie and the kids go. He had 500 women in his life, and there was one woman named Sevilla. Sevilla was his main girl. He loves Sevilla. Sevilla was it. and they kidnapped Sevilla. And the kidnappers told Julius Caesar to give them as a ransom something that equaled the value of Sevilla to Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar gave them a pearl. He gave them one black, supposedly tremendously sized black pearl. That was when they kind of figure out from the writings the dimensions and the way it looked, that this black, and what he paid for it in Roman money back in those days, they figured out that that black pearl, that one pearl, was valued with today's money about over $2 billion. Think about that. Think about a woman having that much value in a man's life, that this man gives something of equal or even higher value just to get them back. Literally, and he felt perfectly fine with that decision. That is the power of gemstones. That is the power of women. And you begin to understand that of all the traditions, all the stories that you can talk about with gemstones, when you talk about a pearl, oh, you talk about something totally different. Pearls, in the Romans believed that pearls were the embodiment of Aphrodite. When Aphrodite, who came from the sea, the droplets of water from her body was what created pearls. In Asian cultures, pearls were the teardrops of dragons flying over the sea. And when they would cry, their tears would turn into pearls. Pearl was the first gemstone that there was a direct connection between gemstones and royalty. You couldn't just wear pearls. You had to. The only people who wore pearls were royalty. Napoleon and many of the kings of all the European monarchies decreed that no one should even wear a pearl. That's how unique, how powerful. But that's what pearls mean. Pearls are the essence of purity. And you think about what was going on, the mindsets we still have today, but the mindsets back in those days of just being something pure. There was the pearls were the symbol of Christianity because of its purity, because of its chastity, because of where it came from. And I told you before in previous episodes that most people believe that a pearl comes from sand being lodged into an oyster, a mollusk. And from that sand, from that intrusion of that foreign object, that a pearl becomes. But that's not how it actually happens. In fact, that's very, very rare. Usually, a pearl is created from an infection, from a bacterial infection that gets inside the oyster. Not only just inside the oyster, but inside the sex organs of an oyster. And from that irritation, from that pain, and ladies, I've never had a UTI, but I've heard how painful they can be. So imagine from something being inside the organs of your body, that pain. The pearl, the oyster, the mollusk secretes a liquid, and to protect it, in order to create a boundary between it and the foreign object. And from something so ugly, something so painful, comes something beautiful. And throughout history, people knew that. They knew how rare it was to have a pearl. If you had one pearl 1,000 years ago, you were rich. If you had a string of pearl, you were like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk type of rich. So today, and then we have, and before I go, we have gold pearls, we have purple pearls. Remember I told you a year ago. Wow, this show's been on for such a long time. About when I went to Tahiti, and I told you that what it was like when that woman, that breathtakingly beautiful woman, I walked into her shop and I was inquiring why one Tahitian pearl cost $40,000. And I'm staring at her, just absolutely gorgeous. And she magically pulls out this pearl and she unfurls basically a pool table. You can tell it was a highly exquisite pool table. And she said, "Watch the light." And she rolled a straight line, ran down the pool table, and she rolled the pearl, and the pearl just symmetrically rolled down the table. And all I saw was the light as it rotated. It hit the bumper on the other side, the wall on the side, and came back in perfect symmetry. And when she took it, when it came back to the side she was on, she picked it up. And the thing that I remembered the most was not just how beautiful she was or how beautiful the pearl was, but what I remembered was when she held that pearl in her hand, she made me understand. I understood that I couldn't see the difference between where her hand ended and the pearl began. That is the power of pearls. That is the power of understanding what a pearl does, the way people thought of pearls. So today, I'm going to talk about a story that I realized that once I began to understand what pearls were back in the day, 4, 5, 1,000 years ago. This was the story that made me begin to see the depth of what jewelry is, what pearls represent, what gemstones represent to people. And it started with the La Peregrina, which means the wanderer. La Peregrina, which is it means the pilgrim, because this pearl, a pear-shaped pearl, which at the time is one of the most famous pearls ever created. It was found about in the 15th century by a slave in Panama. And so beautiful, so rare, so large. This pearl almost fits in the palm of your hand. It's almost as large as the palm of your hand. Was exquisite even back in those days, especially back in those days. And the slave that found it gave it to his master, and it was so beautiful that his master freed him right on the spot. And because his master, Spanish, was so grateful to find something that beautiful, he gave that pearl to the Prince of Spain, Prince Philip. And there we have the beginning and of showing how the whole history of the world can be changed because of a gemstone. And I already told you what Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, emeralds. We talked about Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, and how the French Revolution, the thing that kicked off the French Revolution, was that necklace. Now I'm going to show you how the whole map of the world changed because of this pearl. So we bring in new characters. This is the La Peregrine. We bring in some new characters. Queen Elizabeth I. And as you can see from her outfit, she's covered in pearls. This is when she was a queen. And then we talk about her sister, her half-sister, Mary I, or otherwise known as Bloody Mary. And for those of you who don't know who haven't, and then their father, King Henry VIII. So this is how the story of pearls, literally how I began to understand the significance between gemstones in women and how it relates to the whole rest of the world was from this story. A lot of the reason why I get excited about gemstones is not about the gemstones itself. It's the stories behind them that just fascinate me. So, little background. So, Henry VIII got married to his first wife, was named Catherine. Catherine was Spanish, and she was very, of course, those days people got married just to kind of keep the kingdom together, keep from going to war. So Catherine was Spanish, and she was just a regular girl. She's kind of mediocre as far as her look. She was extremely religious, very pious, and he married her because he had to, political things, but she had a baby. The baby that she had was Mary. Okay. Mary was her child. And at first, Henry VIII loved Mary, loved her. And Mary was just a regular girl. She was smart, but she was not attractive at all. So when King Henry VIII wanted to get rid of Catherine, what he did was he basically, and he wanted to get rid of her for another woman. Anne, you've heard the story, Anne Boleyn. And Anne Boleyn was dark hair. She was mysterious. She was sexy. She was the whole thing. So basically, in order for Henry VIII to get rid of Catherine, who was Catholic, he had to basically deny the Catholic Church and make himself basically the leader of the Church of England. And that's what began the war. So King Henry VIII was a trip. He was the worst stepfather in the world, because what he did was, once he got rid of Catherine and by direct relationship, Mary, he basically disowned him. He just disowned both of them. And Mary was there to watch all of that. And not only did she watch her father, who she loved, that was her father, give up her mother for another woman. Then when Anne had her first child was Elizabeth I. So Mary would literally watch her mother be disowned. She was just kind of reduced to nothing, and watched Anne and Elizabeth kind of keep favor with Henry VIII for a while, until Henry VIII realized that Anne was not going to give him an heir. So what he did was he created this whole thing about Anne. Anne was out there. Now, according to Henry VIII, Anne slept with everybody. I mean, even her own brother. And all these charges was just trumped up on Anne. And literally, he had Anne arrested for treason, every other crime known to man almost. And he had her beheaded right in front of Elizabeth. Right. And so imagine, here is your mother being beheaded by your father, and you watched it. So, and that's what started the tension, the war between Mary and Elizabeth. And we'll talk more about just the intrigue, because it gets a whole lot worse. And when we come back to the other side.
When you do nothing, nothing happens. Best time to take action is now.
This is the time to work on you and your business.
So I've created a group,
An online academy for professionals and entrepreneurs. Power Partners will help you
to start helping yourself.
Helped me change my life and my business.
Not a Toastmasters, it's not a BNI, it's not any of these, but it is. So it's all this stuff in one place.
Get the results that you deserve right now. So what are you waiting for? Let's make it happen.
See you in Power Partners.
All right, we're back. So it is really hot today. I had to turn the fan on. So, all right. So Henry died, thank God, because he was literally ruining England and everything else. So Henry died, making Mary the queen. And when Mary became the queen, even before then, there was a guy named Prince Prince Philip. Prince Philip was a very handsome Spaniard. So imagine how Mary felt when Philip, who had the La Perugina at that time, he gave it to Mary as a potential wedding gift. And of course, Mary, it was like Mary had fell in love, or the high school, the school jock, the captain of the football team wanted to be with Mary, mostly for political reasons. So he gave her the La Perugina. And Elizabeth, who didn't care anything about, Elizabeth had already sworn off of men. Elizabeth had said, I'll never get married, because she saw what marriage did to, what her father did to women in marriage. So she swore she was never going to get married. But she loved jewelry. And more importantly, she loved the La Perugine. She wanted it. She coveted it. And Mary, if you look at the old pictures, any pictures that you see of Mary the First, she's always wearing, here's the La Perugine right there. All her pictures was with that, because she loved him. But in all honesty, Philip didn't really love her. Once Philip met her and saw that she was just, she wasn't hot. She wasn't sexy. She was extremely religious, extremely Catholic. So in her mind, not only did she get a Spanish heir, a Spanish prince, which kind of basically gave her back revenge from Henry VIII kicking out her mother, who was Spanish, but then Philip was Catholic. And she was devoutly Catholic. So that was a good deal for her. So when Philip offered her the La Perugine, she took it and she got married. And everything Philip did with jewelry, all the pieces of jewelry that Philip gave Mary, he gave it to her before he actually met her, because that's how they did things in those days. And what really, when I began to read this story, what cracked me up was just the level of abuse that Mary suffered, that Mary and Elizabeth suffered, because once Mary got married to Philip, now Elizabeth, who used to be the favorite child, she got kicked to the curb, because Mary didn't like Elizabeth at all. She was prettier, she was intelligent, she was more graceful, she was more political. So Mary, who had serious inferiority complex, okay, and rightfully so, she had Elizabeth, almost, she wanted to really kill Elizabeth, but she kind of kept around. So she just had her locked up for a long time, just a long time, had her in prison. And then once Philip met Mary, he didn't like her at all. In fact, Philip didn't even like England. He didn't like the food. He didn't like the people. He didn't like the weather. And he definitely didn't like Mary. So he just tolerated her. He was just like, ew, like, I guess I gotta go. But Mary loved it and literally was willing to do anything that Philip wanted. And of course, Philip being Spanish, the English people were totally not down with that. Like, how could you just let this guy come in, a Spaniard? How could you let him come in? So the Parliament created all kinds of rules to keep Philip at bay. And Mary didn't listen to most of them. And she kept Elizabeth locked up for years. So imagine your sister paying you back for the treatment that she gave you for all those years. That's what Elizabeth was going through. And she just literally barely escaped being killed. Mary had deep issues. Mary even had 2 false pseudo pregnancies. They thought that she was pregnant. She had all the signs of being pregnant, but she wasn't pregnant. In fact, that's really one of the only reasons why Elizabeth was able to come back. And it was the second time that Elizabeth got pregnant. Mary got pregnant, false pregnancy, that he brought Elizabeth to the council, the Parliament brought Elizabeth in to take care of the sister just in case she died during childbirth. And that's when Philip met Elizabeth. When he met Elizabeth, he fell in love with her. He thought Elizabeth was just so beautiful, so sexy, so everything that Mary wasn't. And Mary and Elizabeth knew this, but of course Elizabeth was like, "No, I'm not dealing with you. You know, you're a jerk. Look how you're treating my sister." So, and of course, the reason why they called Mary Bloody Mary was because not only did she was insecure in who she was, but once Philip looked at her and realized that she was kind of an ugly duckling, he ghosted her. He basically said, "Okay, I got to go." He found a reason to go back to Spain. So of course, Mary felt rejected. She already didn't feel good about herself. Now her man, the man that she loved, not only rejected her, but she knew that one of the main reasons why she was rejected was because of Elizabeth, her sister. So she went nuts. See, basically, the reason why they call her Bloody Mary is because she had people, if you were a Protestant back in those days, oh, you didn't make it. Mary had people burnt. Literally, they said over 300 people was burnt to death. She was so bad, even the Spanish court said, that's a bit much. Even Philip said, you can't be just burning people like that. But that's what she did. And it was Philip who loved Elizabeth so much that he literally talked to Mary and said, you should take your sister out of jail. I mean, why you got her in jail? So Mary, not wanting to do this for Elizabeth, but because her man said it, she was like, okay. And of course, that didn't do anything. That didn't change the relationship. Philip just wanted to be with Elizabeth. So once Mary died, okay, Mary was queen. Once Mary was queen, she got with Philip. Philip was king because later on his father basically abdicated the throne. His father was Charles V of Spain. Once he abdicated the throne to become a monk, Philip became the king. So, which scared English people even more. So once Mary got married to Philip, a few years later, Mary died. And Mary hated her sister so much that she literally wrote in her will that Elizabeth, because she did have a son, but he was sickly, Edward. He was sickly, so he didn't really make it. I think he got to about 13, 14 years old. He didn't make it. So Mary knew on her deathbed, she knew that Elizabeth was going to be the queen. There was nobody else. So what Mary did, talk about sibling rivalries, she literally signed in her will that all the jewelry, she couldn't stop Elizabeth from being the queen. She couldn't stop Elizabeth from getting the jewelry, which Elizabeth coveted. See, Mary wanted Philip. Philip wanted Elizabeth. And Elizabeth wanted jewelry. It was just that simple. So it was kind of like a menage a trois, okay, literally, okay, between the three of them, all for different reasons. So this is the cold part, when Mary was on her deathbed and they told Philip that Mary was about to die, Philip, his response was he sent an envoy to Elizabeth to say, yo, you want to marry me? Because he never wanted Mary. And everybody knew it. Everybody, the whole country knew that Philip was really down with Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, of course, he was a man, said, no, I don't want you. You're a creep. So once Mary died, all the royal jewelry went to Elizabeth, with the exception of all the jewelry that Philip gave her, including the La Parisienne. So in fact, the day that Mary died, Philip sent another letter, an envoy to Elizabeth saying, your sister's dead. Let's hook up. Let's get together. And of course, Elizabeth said, no, I'm still not marrying you. You're still a creep. You're still a man. I don't want you. But while we're talking, that pearl that you gave Mary, I would like to have that. It's my sister. I like to have it in the memory, whatever. And Philip said, no, you can't get it. If you marry me, cool. But if you're not married to me, I can't get it. Because see, one of the symbols of pearls is marriage. It's purity, it's loyalty, it's chastity. So pearls had a tremendous meaning. When you had a pearl, that and even Mary understood this. When you had a pearl, you were talking about dominance. For Mary, that pearl, even though she knew her man wasn't treating her right, when she got the La Paragine, she knew that we were talking about global dominance, because at that time, Spain was the ultimate power in the universe. So for Mary, imagine she was marrying the most eligible bachelor in Europe. He was a prince, became a king. He looked halfway decent. Okay, he was a nice looking guy. He had this whole thing. He had this whole thing going on. You know, he had the beard and everything, the mustache. So he was all that, but he didn't want Mary. But he gave Mary the La Paragine, and Elizabeth understood the power of that. You have to understand that everybody wore pearls. In fact, Elizabeth understood, like Cleopatra, she understood that part of her power came from gemstones. And like Cleopatra had emeralds, Elizabeth had pearls. So the pearl that she wanted was the La Paragine. And of course, Philip didn't want to give her that. And that's when the war started. That's when the tensions that was already high because of the stupid stuff that Henry did, you know, destroyed the Catholic Church, basically made him, for all intents and purposes, the Pope. He basically kind of X'd out a Spanish queen, a Spanish heir, one of theirs. So they didn't like what he did to Catherine. They definitely didn't like what he did to Anne. Okay, I mean, he shouldn't even have been with Anne. So Spanish people hated Henry for that. Not to mention just the normal tensions between those two countries. And then now you're going to Philip felt this because Elizabeth. I mean, they made sure that Philip didn't have any power in England. So now here's this guy coming back trying to marry Elizabeth. And Elizabeth said, no, I'm not marrying you. So Philip said, okay, cool. You're not marrying me. You're not getting the pearl. So what Elizabeth did, which angered Philip, and well, he was a king by that time, and angered, he literally, what Elizabeth did was literally allow pirates, and we talked about pirates. She allowed pirates to continue to raid Spanish galleons. You have to understand that Spain, if you divide the world in half, the upper half of the world, the northern hemisphere, belonged to Spain. So imagine all the jewelry, all the gemstones, the emeralds, the pearls, the gold that was coming from the New World by Spanish galleon. And you have to imagine those big giant ships, the galleon. There was so much jewelry coming from North America that there was literally 500 ships in a row sailing, filled, I mean, tons of gemstones and jewelry. And Elizabeth knew that. So she allowed pirates, even though they weren't called pirates, they were called pirateers, because pirateers basically had the okay from the Queen, Elizabeth, to do whatever, as long as they were attacking Spanish galleons with jewelry. And what Elizabeth really wanted, she wanted the La Paragine. So when you see pictures of Elizabeth, normally Elizabeth not only has jewelry on, but she has all these. Look at the pearls down here. Those were pearls that were like the Paragine, but it wasn't the Paragine. And that's what she wanted. And she was determined that she was going to get one of those. And as she was allowing the pirateers to raid Spanish galleons and to take their jewelry, to take their gold, to take their pearls and emeralds and sapphires, that she was building up England as she was robbing basically from her brother-in-law. That pissed off, that angered Philip, that angered Spain. So what Philip did was create the Spanish Armada. And think about it. Let's get right down to the basically we're talking about two sisters, half sisters, who couldn't stand each other because their father was a jerk. They were both abused, and instead of hating the father, they hated each other. Because the father first loved Mary, then he got rid of Mary, then the father loved Elizabeth because Henry loved Anne, the mother. Then once he got rid of Anne, beheaded her. With Elizabeth watching, of course, Elizabeth couldn't stand Mary, and that tension went on for years. And when Mary became queen, they were together. She brought Elizabeth on for a second, but even during her coronation, Elizabeth outshone Mary. You know, Mary was just dowdy. Mary was just like plain. So she was just like, hey, how you doing? The people weren't feeling her, but Elizabeth was just, hi, you know, beautiful and everything else. So Spain created the Spanish Armada, 1,000 ships. She had literally an army of 25,000 men, cannons, gunpowder, and everything else. And what they were going to do, what Philip was going to do, was take over England. Kind of like a Putin thing. He was going to take over England, and that witch of a woman, Elizabeth, who was, of course, Protestant. Oh, we can't have that. And so there was actually two armadas. And what got me was that here's a man tripping over a woman and so upset with the woman because he wouldn't give her a piece of jewelry that he was going to create an army, a navy to defeat her, all because of a pearl. All because of a pearl, because that's what it was about. Elizabeth wanted the Perugine. Mary wouldn't give it to her. Literally said, you can get everything else but the thing that you really wanted. So Elizabeth said, okay, I'm going to get it. The first Spanish Armada, oh my goodness, what happened with the first one? The first one literally fell apart before it even started. Literally, they had because Elizabeth, because she was using pirates or pirateers, they had faster boats. They were able to change their whole strategy, naval warfare strategy, because the English boats were smaller and they were able to move in and just attack and come out. That's it. Whereas the Spanish galleons, first of all, they was huge. Second, they were slow moving. They could only move in one direction, where the Spanish boats could move in different directions and had high-powered cannons that would sink a ship. That was the first armada. So Philip spent half of the country's treasury in order to, and most of the half of the forests of Spain, to build this armada just to get Elizabeth. Elizabeth, like Cleopatra, used her purity. When you see Elizabeth's face like that, that's because Elizabeth wanted to look like pearl. She wanted to look like a pearl. See, what makes pearls truly special is that they do three things. On the outside, the nacre is so hard that the surface is reflective. When the light travels inside, it basically radiates. It illuminates, so it looks like it's glowing from within. And then, of course, because when it goes through and you have the different layers that are off-centered, then you have what's called diffusion. And the diffusion would break the rays of light into different colors. You see it in white pearls, but you also see it in Tahitian pearls or black pearls or gold pearls. You see that change of color. So that's what was treasured. That's what was wanted. So the second armada, he used the rest of his treasure. So he literally made Spain, he bankrupted Spain basically because he wanted what he wanted. He refused to give a pearl to Elizabeth, and he wanted Elizabeth. Elizabeth wanted the pearl. And the whole history of Europe changed because of that. Because of what people want because of the way people perceive gemstones, perceive jewelry. And when I began to think back to Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, it's the same thing. Women and jewelry, the whole history of mankind revolves around that. Think about how many things in history where gemstones are like the ultimate historical witness. There are so many things that happen in history. We got 3 more weeks of, or 2 more Wednesdays so the next 2 Wednesdays, I'm going to tell you another story about pearls and what pearls changed, how the whole artificial imitation pearl market, Mikimoto, how did pearls change Japan? But what I want you to understand is that pearls are so much more than just something that girls wear, women wear. There's a significance to it. There's a power to it. And when you begin to understand the value of a pearl, the value of the woman, the young lady that you are with or that's in your life, you begin to understand. Once you understand that story, you begin to understand the value of it. What does it mean? What does it mean to have those characteristics? Have you ever seen a woman in your life, television, movies, or hopefully in your life, where that woman was just beautiful, where she was iridescent, her spirit, she seemed like she glows? That's a pearl. If you've ever worn a string of pearls, men used to wear pearls. And I'm sorry that we don't, because if you've ever had a string of pearl on your neck, it's an enchanting experience. The coolness of it, the fact that it comes from an organic organism, the fact that it's so rare. You can't find natural pearls really anymore. I live on Lake Michigan, and 100 years ago, not so much Lake Michigan, but some of the other Great Lakes of Illinois, 150 years ago, there would be people every weekend down at the shore getting pearls. In fact, when the Spaniards first came to the United States, there was so much pearls being brought into the market that between the years of 1515 and 1545 were the greatest amounts of pearls being brought into, and all of it was for royalty. Pearls was almost exclusively for royalty. So we don't have those conditions now because of imitation pearls and things, but that's what it meant. That's what it means. Those are the stories, and it just amazes me how much of history is changed because of jewelry, because of gemstones, because of the way people feel about having an emerald, having gold, having a pearl. And when you begin to understand what makes pearls different than other gemstones, there's no other gemstone. Well, first of all, pearl is not a gemstone. It's not a mineral. It's not a true example of a gemstone, because it's not a direct mineral, but what it does to the light. How does it interact with the light? You have to care for a pearl. Look at the similarities. You have to care for a woman in your life. Not saying that she's weak or anything else, but you have to care for her. You have to understand her beauty. You have to understand the way she interacts with the light. What is her symmetry? What is her shape? What is her color? And when you look at the different colors of gemstones, when you look at the beautiful, how many people, your wife, your girlfriend, I'm thinking about, I was watching Sophie. Sophie is in the 3rd grade. So she's like, what, 10 years old? When I saw her, and I had the honor of meeting her and meeting her mom, you see the similarities, you see the beauty, you see just the light that came off of this young lady. And that's what you see when you look at pearls. So the next time you see a woman, I have Doretta. This is for you. Doretta is an AKA, and their symbol is pearls, and there's a reason why. Because pearls represent femininity. It represents mysterious. It represents something sultry. So today's homework assignment is take a look at the woman in your life. Take a look at the women in your life, women, and recognize the pearl that they are. What makes them different? What makes them interact with the light? What is their luminescence? What is their symmetry? And then once you understand what that is, then you'll begin to understand the value of their story. So as always, my name is Barry Mixon. I am a gemological storyteller. And do that homework assignment. Look at the people in your life. Look at yourself and discover who you are, what makes you special. And I'll see you next week with another exciting gem hunter story. Until then, au revoir, atatella, bye-bye.